And that experiment lasted, I believe, a grand total of 60 days. And the reason for that is this head of engineering realized that he was spending all of his days approving expense reports, vacation leaves, and the like. And so I guess if only for that, managers were useful to do these administrative tasks. Well, we thought that was a really good research question to try to answer. Do managers actually matter? Are they, without them, will we actually be a better company? So what we did was we looked at our best and worst managers. We looked at their performance ratings, their engagement scores, whatever impressions we could get on the managers. And we looked at both groups, and we looked at them using what we call a double-blind methodology. So this is in the medical practice. When you administer a placebo, it's important that the person who's receiving the placebo doesn't know that it's a placebo. And it's important that the person who's administering the placebo also doesn't know that what I'm holding in my hand is a placebo. So that's what a double blind is. So we applied the same amount of rigor to this, interviewed these managers, and tried to understand, A, do they actually matter? And B, if they do matter, well, what do they do? What do the best do that the worst don't do that make them really the best? So the good news is that they actually do matter. And when you have a really good manager, and by the way, to the people in the group who are leaders, this is good for you to know. For those of you who are, digital marketers that just want to do good work, like it's a harsh reality that you can be brilliant, but really so much of your brilliance will either come out into the world or get suppressed depending on the kind of manager that you have. Said differently, it's true what they say, that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. We saw that our best managers had teams that were more engaged, more productive. They stayed longer in the company, and they just generally created better products. So what did they do differently using this double-blind methodology, right? Apparently there were 8 things. Now, if you were to just look through this list real quick, nothing really will stand out as entirely path-breaking. But let me share with you a few highlights of why this became really important for Google. So first of all, you had a group of engineers who actually thought that management was just not a productive use of resources. And with this research, we were able to silence all those debates because it was data on them. It wasn't some random management book that we pulled off the shelf. The second one is, if you look at this list, so it's ranked in order of importance. Vision and strategy was not the most important thing that good managers could do. Also, which was very controversial with their engineers, having the technical expertise to manage the work was also not the most important thing. And they really, really wrestled with this. Instead, what really was important was this idea of being a good coach. Like, are you able to actually bring out the brilliance in the people that you work with? Now, we've, as you can imagine, like we've turned this into, a more rigorous way of measuring how, who our good managers are and who aren't as good. In fact, we're just going through a cycle now, and I can very quickly see across Asia Pacific, like which pockets of our organization have managers who score very lowly on some of these things. But what's important to show is that the moment you begin to do this kind of research and identify what are these really important things, you could actually start to see improvements. So this data shows that when we first launched some way of scoring managers in 2010, the red bar would be our bottom scoring managers, and then your average manager would be the blue bar. If you look at this data, one thing you can conclude here is that with this kind of an effort, it's actually harder to be a terrible manager at Google now. And we're just making more and more progress along these lines. So managers are important, and you need to find a good manager if you don't have a good one now, and you need to aspire to be a really good manager. So we thought this was great. What else can we study as a people operations team? Well, we hire a lot of people. We're now 100,000 people globally. We have about, don't know what the latest numbers are, but there's something like 3 million resumes that come through our staffing team, and we only really hire about 10,000 or so people each year. And so there's a natural question around, well, really hiring the right people is really a game of prediction, right? Isn't it? It's like I see a great CV, which like surely 50% of this is BS. How do I find the real stuff in that CV? And then how do I set people up for success? So our staffing team asked this question. So can we figure out like what is the right combination of people? And so if we can hire for that kind of combination, then we can create super teams all around Google, thereby making Google, more effective. Right? Okay. So if you were to think about this question, there are really two ways. There are only really two possibilities to answer this question. So the first one is composition. Is it a question of who we get into the team that matters? The second possibility is process. It's not so much who, but how the team operates. And so we looked at so many different variables. We looked at if we had a group of a combination of extroverts and introverts, or just extroverts or just introverts, like what would we expect in terms of effectiveness? If the teams were co-located in the same place, does that actually matter? If I had 8 players, if I had just the best people clustered into the same teams, will I expect to see a better team? And so we poured over as much data as we could to answer this question. So at the highest level, really the answer to that has been that process actually matters so much more than composition. How a team works matters more than who's on the team. There's another way to say this, which is, even if you hired 8 players, it won't guarantee that you will have an A team. And so what were the things that were really important in building these really effective, really high-performing teams? I want to share that with you now, and there were 5 really. I'll dwell more on the first. So the first one is this idea of psychological safety. So we know that our best teams at Google that create our best products are psychologically safe teams. What do I mean by that? Psychological safety is that belief where people feel that they can take interpersonal risks. It's that feeling that if I share this idea that isn't a well thought through idea, that people will not shame me for it. They won't judge me for these ideas. If I shoot for the stars and try to pursue something really good and didn't meet my goals, I won't get punished for that. That's what psychological safety means. It reminds me of a time where back before social media became a big thing, we had this product called Wave. I don't know if any of you had ever come across Google Wave, but it failed. So this is a failure story. So Google Wave was sort of like your before Facebook, before Orkut, which is also a Google product, before Friendster, we had Wave. And what happened was we got a bunch of engineers in Sydney even to say, okay, we'll pull you out of your teams. We're gonna pause you on any promotions, any salary increases for 2 years. You're gonna work on this product, and if this product succeeds, and it was a very big, bold goal that they were going for, if this product succeeds, life-changing rewards, as if you did an IPO on a company that you built yourself. They launched it and it failed. And so Larry Page and then Laszlo Bock had a question that they had to answer, which is, what do we do with this team? Do we reward them for trying? Or do we not reward them because, well, results are what matter? Well, we decided to reward them, not in the life-changing way that we had promised if it did well, but we rewarded them. And that was a very important part of building that kind of culture of psychological safety. Now, it's very easy to understand why people, would rather, not speak up in conversations. One really quick way to know if your team is psychologically safe is if your team has a lot of debates. And what's crucial is that they have debates and conflict not over personalities, but over ideas. If you have a lot of debates over ideas, then you can almost be certain that you have a psychologically safe team. And the reason for that is, no one wakes up in the morning saying, today I want to be ignorant, incompetent, intrusive, and negative. This is my goal for the day. No one does that. And instead, if they feel like there's a risk of seeming these things, then there's a very easy strategy that anyone can employ, which we've been taught from the very beginning, which is to just not speak up, not to say anything, just be quiet. How many times in your meetings, and by the way, we've taken these ideas to places like Japan and China and Israel. I was there just recently. And it's true, it's the same phenomenon. It's a human phenomenon. It's not culturally sensitive. It's when people feel afraid to look stupid, they're just not going to speak up. So you might say, okay, I get it. Psychological safety, so that's good. However, does that mean that the trade-off, therefore, is excellence? Do we therefore need to create this really warm, family-like, to lean on Patty for a sec, this really family-like environment? Is that the goal? Is that what we're aspiring to do at the risk of excellence? Let me tell you a quick story. So I love my wife, as you would hope I did. And very early in our marriage, we discovered very quickly that we didn't like the same kinds of shows. She actually liked the more interesting, action-packed kind of shows, and admittedly, this is my guilty pleasure, I actually preferred the romantic comedies. She couldn't stand it. But as a young couple, we just had one TV. So, at the end of the tiring day, it was either I watched my show, and she can pick up a book and go and read that book. But I loved her so much. I had this unconditional love for her, and I had a brilliant solution, which is I bought her an iPad. Problem solved, right? Now that's not what we want in our organizations, right? We sometimes don't have the resources to create multiple iPads all across the organization. And what happens when you have a team that's psychologically safe, they're able to come into conflict with those trade-offs really well, really productively, and eliminating therefore the need for an extra iPad. Right? Instead, what you might think about is psychological safety and excellence accountability are probably two things on two separate spectrums. And by the way, this is research that's been done in Harvard by a researcher named Amy Edmondson, and she studied this not only in tech, but primarily in very traditional environments like the healthcare industry, like hospitals, etc. What you want instead is a really good mix of high amount of safety, high amount of care, and also high expectations and high amount of accountability. What you don't want is where it's low and you create this apathy in the organization. But you also don't want a huge focus on excellence with not a lot of psychological safety, because you create anxiety. What you want instead is a high performance zone. I brought this idea I mentor startup founders every now and again, and I brought this idea once to a startup founder, he was based in Brazil, and he had built a retail platform. Sorry, not a real estate platform, rather. And he started his startup as he was this American guy who loved sports, and so he thought, I'm going to create like a basketball team kind of culture in my org. And he started off with really a lot of psychological safety. You could argue somewhat of a bro culture, but fist bumping. People would on Monday mornings they would come in and everyone's just happy. The office space was just one big space, and people were just really, really happy. And then he realized that their payment portal had a bug in it and had been down for 30 days. And for those of you who've done startups, having your payment portal down for 30 days is it's suicide, right? Your revenues would not be coming in. And he was livid, he was angry. And this was the point where I actually met him, and he was ranting about why is it that people aren't excellent, or don't attend to the details, don't really look deeply into, or don't own the work. And he flipped, and he suddenly became this guy who would always come into work, and on Monday morning, instead of the fist bumps and hugs, he would lecture them on accountability, and he was big on this word, accountability. And what had happened was he went from comfort zone to anxiety zone fairly quickly. And so I told him, okay, well, here's a really simple trick. Why don't you just try this? At the start of your meeting, just go ahead and give people 2 minutes of uninterrupted time, just to share, like, what are you working on and what help do you need? Just try it out. He did it once, nothing happened. He did it the second time, nothing happened.